morning, good afternoon, good evening, or whatever time you're listening to us. Welcome to another episode of the Striker Tejas podcast, part of the Striker News Network. Man, we've got a lot to talk about today. It's going to be action packed. We've got obviously we'll talk Open Cup. We've got a bunch of matches that are the Texas teams played this past week. We've got games coming up ahead that are going to be very, very important. And of course, we've got almost a full squad here. Unfortunately, Roberto could not make it today, but we've got all of our beat reporters for all three Texas USL teams. And let's go ahead and make a quick stop over to the borderlands and say hello to my good friend Joe Rodriguez. Joe, how are you?
Hey, what's going on, Edson, Jonathan? It's good to be back after being gone out on holiday vacation last week. Good to be back, seeing you guys, talking with you guys, and excited to discuss everything we have in store in this episode of the Striker Tejas.
And so now we travel over, we take I-10 and we land to the 210 area where Jonathan Check is awaiting to give his thoughts on San Antonio FC. Jonathan, how are you?
Doing all right. Like I was telling you when we hopped in the call before we started recording, I've kind of been just taking a day to breathe. I was doing our U.S. Open Cup coverage the last few days. It was really cool to be the person chosen for that, and just to be around, all that excitement. Not obviously with Sacramento, a USL team making the final for the first time in 14 years, and having a good showing itself. But yeah, I as exciting as it was, like I said, I needed a moment to breathe and relax.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there was a lot of load with the Open Cup coverage, the USL coverage, and it's a lot. I can imagine on your table, but and down here in the 956 Puro 956 my name is Edson Ochoa, and I am the beat reporter for RGV FC Toros. So you touched upon it, Jacob. Jacob, sorry, I just finished recording I just finished recording my own podcast, so I still need to transition. So, Jonathan, you touched upon the final between Sacramento Republic and Orlando City SC. What was your overall thoughts on the game?
Yeah, so obviously all the attention was going to be on Sacramento coming into this. Like I said, as the first lower division team to make it to the final in 14 years, and although they didn't win on the night, if you look at the 3-0 scoreline, it kind of flatters Orlando, to be honest, because I think yes, they were the team with the upper hand throughout the night, but Sacramento was right there with them. Had even some stretches of the matches where it looked like the better side, where it was on top, and it did not look out of place. There was never a time uh, until maybe the end when Orlando got two goals 5 minutes apart. Things started to crumble for Sacramento. There was never really a time before that where Orlando City was just completely outclassing Sacramento, and it might say something about just the grittiness and the spirit of that Sacramento team, but it might just say that the gap between MLS and USL Championship might not be as big as some people think.
Joe, come on! I know you have something to say. You're
No. I think my thoughts kind of go in line or go parallel with what Jonathan is saying. The one thing that that I didn't watch the game, but I was following it on social media, and then obviously, like Jonathan said, two goals come within the span of 5 minutes and stuff like that. It was pretty evident just following the game on social media that Sacramento did have its opportunities, did make things difficult. And talking about the I guess the difference in level and ability between the MLS and USL Championship, I completely agree. I don't think it is that significant. And what I would have wanted to know, what I wished would have happened, and I guess there's that saying, some people just want to see the world burn. I think with regards to the world of American soccer, you know um, MLS talking heads were very quick to point out when they won when the Seattle Sounders won this first ever Conca Champions League, that club soccer now the MLS is the king of CONCACAF as far as club soccer goes. If they would have lost, if an MLS team would have lost last night, how much of a step backwards would it have been, quote unquote, for MLS soccer in its, in its development, or in its in its capacity to continue to transcend. That's what I would have liked for that conversation to go, and I think it goes very close in hand with what Jonathan just pointed out, as far as that the levels in competition really aren't that different. I completely wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
something not to plug my takeaways or anything, but something I wrote was it took a while for Orlando to break through, and obviously they were expected to eventually. They were expected to, they were the heavy favorites, and if they hadn't been able to do it, even if this match had gone, like 120 minutes and gone to penalties, I think you're asking a lot of questions, not even necessarily about MLS, but about Orlando City. This is a team that, when it came in, was sort of one of the showpiece franchises for MLS. And I didn't even really realize it because I hadn't looked that closely at MLS over the years, but didn't have the best first 5 years. I mean, didn't make the playoffs any of those years, made it to the semifinals of the Open Cup once. So at some point, you've got to start getting results. And obviously, they were able to do that. And also, something I will add about sort of the difference between the two leagues, first and second division, obviously, one of the only real distinctions is it was encapsulated by something Mark Briggs, head coach for Sacramento Republic, said after the match, where he said, Facundo Torres is probably going to the World Cup in November. And he cost $9 million, which is more than the entire valuation of our club. So it's just occasionally these one or two things where the MLS teams have just more resources and they're able to buy these game-changing players that are just not even a cut above USL, but a cut above most of the guys in MLS. So it's those little injections that they can make to rise above.
But also on the flip side, Jonathan, I think it's also important to say. I mean, it continues. You also got to analyze it. Because people were very quick to point out Seattle Sanders wins the CONCACAF Champions League. Oh, MLS is supreme in CONCACAF as far as cup play, and that's what fans of and supporters of the MLS say. Well, if they would have taken a hit last night, you also got to chew on that humility pill and say, you know what, this was a step backwards for what is the MLS. I mean, it's only the
and I
logical
think
thing.
and I think that's the problem. I think with a lot of fans, and not just MLS. I'm not picking on MLS. We see that
I am.
obviously you see that also in Liga MX. You see it everywhere. Where I know there's a saying in English that a once sparrow doesn't make a spring or something like that. I don't know if you guys remember the correct. But basically, it's like based on one game or 1 year, they're already saying, going into the generalization of, oh, we're better now, right? Where how many years has Liga MX dominated MLS? Sure, it's a really good step for MLS to finally to finally win a CONCACAF Champions League. But they also have to realize, who are they going against? You're going one of the worst Pumas in their history, and so and as well, if Sacramento Republic were to have won yesterday, I still don't think that's still a good enough evidence to say, oh, USL Championship the level of play is near MLS, which it's not. There's still a long way. There's still a long way to go for USL to be able to compete talent wise with with MLS, and it all goes to show just how much they invest and how much of them. I guess let's not beat around the bush. How much a monopoly MLS tends to want to have with American soccer, and in capturing the eyes of the world, and saying that, oh, we're what attracts people to soccer here in America. Like, it doesn't matter. There's USL League One, USL Championship. No, this is the league to be in American soccer. But
I think it's also kind of telling that MLS after the match was saying Orlando City wins its first trophy in club history, and it's like, There was a pretty direct link between the old USL Orlando City SC that won 2 league titles. So it just says something about what MLS thinks about itself and the other leagues in this country that aren't MLS.
Yeah, definitely. It's MLS washing, pretty much, basically. Unfortunately, that's what it is. I feel like the MLS environment is more like very self centered, and it's them or nothing. I would have loved for Sacramento to have won. Unfortunately, it did not happen. It's like you mentioned, they were doing so well, but a mental lapse by the defense, and I'm not going to specify who exactly because I think he had enough
And you
on
know
his
what's
plate
funny
about it.
is it's funny. Karma and the cosmos kind of almost aligned perfectly for what might have taken place. For a possible different result that would have been not just that would have been extra satisfying for Sacramento. Because I saw a tweet where Dan Garber obviously was in attendance at that game. I mean, it would have been a sweet middle finger for Sacramento to win. Because you got to remember, Sacramento and their fan base, that city, I'm sure they still haven't forgotten that they've gotten overlooked on more than a couple of occasions to get an expansion team. And
Yes.
it was a franchise that has been making, solid arguments for it to be elected. So I think, I mean, I'm sure there was some loyal Sacramento supporters that would have loved to have won and just kind of ran into Garber on the way out of the stadium and let him have a peace of mind, which would have just, which would have been sweet justice, without needless to say.
Yeah, so and that was something that Mark Briggs pre and post game was talking about how this team or the city and the club and its community has obviously had a bunch of hurt with being awarded an MLS franchise and then one of the investors pulling out. I mean that's not necessarily a Garber thing. Let's be fair. But it does, I'm sure, leave a bitter taste in their mouth. They wish that they were making that jump and they're not as things stand. They need to find another investor. But this injected some life. You don't need to be in MLS to have an exciting run like this, and they proved that.
And the fact of the matter is that they earned the respect of a lot of people in America, which I feel like that. I honestly feel like Sacramento, the team needs to keep their head up high because I think they've exceeded their expectations and how far they were going to get in the Open Cup and even in the final to be able to hang on for as long as they did. It just goes to show that they're onto something in their process, and hopefully we'll see what happens in the future for the city of Sacramento. But let's move on to our USL teams. So in the last weekend, San Antonio FC had a match where they ended up getting a victory against Oakland Roots on Saturday, September 3rd. I want to say this is the first time that any one of our Texas teams have won in California this season. Am I wrong or am I right?
I know for a fact that you were wrong because SAFC beat Orange County like third or fourth week of the season, or I guess maybe about a month into the season. But besides that, well, SAFC did win
The
at
logos sure as
Monterrey.
hell haven't.
Yeah, you guys have had a bad time in California, but I know SAFC has gotten a few wins away there. They are, I think, 2 wins away from tying the record for the most away wins in league history. So yeah, it has happened, but there have been a few other games for SAFC that weren't as easy in California. Yeah, so it's the main storyline coming into this match was SAFC had kind of not been doing as well recently. Had at at least been creating maybe some decent chances, but not executing, not you know dropping the ball to so to speak in key moments. and had gone 2-2-2 coming into this match, and so it was kind of a question. Okay, this is a moment in the season when things are starting to look a little shaky. How is the team able to respond? And it honestly responded pretty well this past weekend. Um, After the match, Mitchell Tanner was saying this kind of evoked the complete performances from earlier in the season, where SAFC capitalized on its chances, defended really well, had a good hold on the run of play, and when it didn't, was able to withstand, weather the storm. Um, so I know it's maybe been a while since we had one of those away games for SAFC to talk about, but it was a case where they went on the road, did the job in the critical moments this time, and came away with a 2-0 win, which, coming away with 3 points from California, like we said, not something that our teams were able to do a lot this year.
And San Antonio needed that. They needed those 3 points to raise their morale, because they had come into this match with a loss against Indy 11, and obviously the draw against the Toros, and there were questions starting to be thrown around by the fan base about how this team was going to end their season.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, SAFC once or twice in the past has had a good season and then just fallen off at the end. The most recent case was 2020 when everything looked great. They started the year on, I think, an 11 match unbeaten streak, and then it all fell apart. And look what happened. They lose in the first round of the playoffs to New Mexico United. So it's difficult to put a full season together. I mean, San Diego recently has had its struggles. Louisville City has dropped points a lot recently. I mean, we talk about SAFC losing the ND11. So did Louisville. I think that was after the last time we recorded a podcast, or maybe it was before. I don't know. But yeah, it's hard to put a full season together. And so I think SAFC responded well to the struggles, and depending on who you ask, some people at the club were willing to admit, yeah, we know things haven't quite been as good. Some people were maybe a little more defensive, but at least this last Saturday, we're able to set that aside. Like I said, put together a complete performance. Maybe not out of the woods yet. You don't want to say, all right, that's one solid performance. Everything is cured. But it's certainly a step in the right direction. And if SAFC takes a few more, I think they are able to put that rough stretch behind them and are looking good for the run into the playoffs.
Oh, I thought Joe was gonna.
I was like, does someone want to chime in?
No, I think, honestly, to be honest, I think, like I mentioned, this was a much needed victory for San Antonio to kind of qualm the questions from the fans. I know yesterday when I was doing a Twitter space after the Toros match, which we will talk about later on, there was a San Antonio fan that chimed in. He was talking about that. He was getting worried about how San Antonio was going to be entering the playoffs, where even with the fact that you brought in a lot of signings, this late into the season, that were supposed to kind of help with the offensive performance. There was still a lot of questions when it came to finishing. With San Antonio OC. I was watching a little bit actually of the game, because my sister and my mom, we went over to a wing bar here in McAllen, and I was actually surprised that as soon as I come in, they were actually showing the San Antonio match in one of the TVs in the restaurant. So I was watching some of that game, and it's just, I think by the time I got there, they were already winning 1-0. But despite them, Oakland having most of the possession, San Antonio looks so comfortable, like not having the possession and being able to limit the opportunities by Oakland. So good job for San Antonio to get back into their winning ways in California, and hopefully for their cause, it'll be a start to be able to get some good momentum going into into the postseason. So, Joe, I did not mean to skip you because I know you El Paso Locomotive played on Friday and not on Saturday like San Antonio. But you guys came off of a positive result from the Derby del Camino Real that Friday.
Yeah, no, definitely. It was actually a little bit of history. Club history was made on Friday night as the Locomotive got their first ever win up in the city up north from us in franchise history. So obviously, it was a big deal. A lot of fans were really expecting that, which made it two victories in a row for El Paso Locomotive after not accumulating any points, failing to accumulate points in six matches prior to that. So it was definitely a big relief to get two in a row to win against New Mexico United. And New Mexico United that I think outshot the Locomotive 2-1. But still, the difference in shots on target was only 4-3 in favor of New Mexico United. So that says a lot. But no, it was an important win, one that gave New Mexico, or excuse me, gave the Locomotive some confidence, which is much needed going into these last handful of games into the season. And it was a good win. It was a good win for them. I think it was, for me, to be perfectly honest with you, it was probably one of the bigger surprises of the season. I had this one chalked up at the most to a draw. Because just I know it's just the biggest rivalry for the locals for obviously for New Mexico United, and it's always a tough game. And with the way El Paso's been playing in the past, I couldn't. It was difficult for me to see a win, but at the end of the day, Lucho Solinak scores a pair of goals, and just kind of gets it done for El Paso in a very good way.
But what changed in this game? Because I know y'all had been going through some tough results. I think you guys had. I'm looking here at the last couple of games y'all had. You got one, two, three, four.
Six
Uh, yeah,
six
yeah,
games
yeah,
without winning.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but what changed?
I think. I mean, I think just what it was just. Um, I don't think per se in those six matches El Paso looked bad. I think it was just that they were due. I don't think El Paso has steered far from what it is and how it is that they play. I just think they went through a drought, and I think they just kind of turned it around, and all of a sudden, um, those touches where they lacked that defining precision, they came home to roost over these last two games,
Mhm.
leading up to the Toros game, which we'll talk about right now. But I think that's what changed. I don't think. I think John Hutchinson has been very consistent in his starting squad. He's been very consistent in his formation, which, after what we saw last night, and which we'll talk about right now, I think we would want to see a little bit more variation, and I look forward to that also developing for the Locomotive here in these last few games and possibly into the playoffs.
So, as Joe mentioned, RGV and El Paso Locomotive did face off last night at Southwest University Park, where RGVFC gets a 2-0 win, making it the first time in club history that RGV gets a victory in El Paso. And let's listen with Joe first. What, because you just talked about getting a really positive victory against New Mexico. Now all of a sudden you come back home and and you get another loss against RGV.
Yeah, look, for starters, I thought it was for all intents and purposes. I described the first half on my half. I described it as it being entertaining, uh, competitive, a lot of back and forth offensively. I think, if I believe, if I remember correctly, in the 17th, Rodrigo Ruiz hit a banger off of the right post that didn't go in. Uh, and that was, I think, the biggest chance on goal for the first 70 minutes of the match. But even the fact that that was the only very, very close call, I think there was a lot of up and down, back and forth. That a lot of appearances by both teams in their offensive third. So it was entertaining from that point. Um, and I thought the game obviously it was a 2-0 game, but I thought the game was competitive. I thought it was an entertaining match for 90 minutes. That's why I was shocked, completely shocked, when I asked John Hutchinson about it. I asked him in the post game conference, um, you know, that it was a close game, and you know, he told me that I was behind the West his team's performance. He said, and I quote, that they were uninspired, that they were lethargic, and I quote that it was the worst performance that his team has had all season. Now that's to be debated. I didn't think El Paso was that bad, but then he also alluded to the fact that he felt that his team might have been both physically and emotionally drained from that big derby win against New Mexico United the previous Friday. Um, I didn't see it that way. I think I didn't see an El Paso Locomotive that was that bad. If anything,
Mhm.
Edson, and this is where I'll turn it over to you, I think, honestly, and it's probably going to start to snow here in San Antonio and in the Rio Grande Valley, but I think Wilmer Cabrera might have gotten the best of John Hutchinson last night. And that is the nice thing I'm saying with regards to the Toros loss. So that's why I'm saying I think it might snow tonight, but in the middle or towards the end of summer. But no, I really do. I think early in the match, the way the Toros were denying that offensive precision in the final touches for the Locomotive. I think Wilmer had the boys over from Edinburgh really well prepared, and I don't think the substitutions were much of a factor for El Paso Locomotive. And I think the Toros had a game plan, and they executed, and like I said, I'll repeat it again for a second time. I think Cabrera got the best of John Hutchinson last night. He outcoached them.
Oh yeah, I agree, because I think this one and last season, when El Paso was still under Mark Lowry, RGV and Wilmer Cabrera got the better of them for most of the game. Last year they weren't able to capitalize. They ended up losing that game, but this year they were. The Toros actually did have a defensive presence that held on to, not just a victory but a clean sheet at Southwest University Park. Um, One of the things that kind of caught my eye, and we were talking about it a little while ago, was that surprisingly RGVSC has had positive numbers this season at baseball fields. And one of the key aspects is, as Wilmer mentioned 2 weeks ago in practice, was that with his play style defensive of the high pressure, the fact that they don't have to cover as much ground with that high pressure and to block off those spaces really helps RGV. We saw that against Las Vegas. We saw that yesterday against El Paso Locomotive. How many times did El Paso give the ball away to RGV? They buckled under the pressure and put the Toros in a favorable situation in front of goal. The first goal started off like that by RGV, and they had other opportunities as well where the Toros would intercept, out in the midfield. They passed by Yuma or passed by somebody else. I think right now that this little machine, this high pressure machine, is starting to click for RGV. Everybody's starting to realize what their role is going to be. Who's going to be the one that's going to be doing the high pressure? The attackers know where they have to be if they're able to win the ball in the midfield to put yourself in a favorable situation. So I think that is starting to kind of work for Wilmer Cabrera. We're starting to see some of these results. I know that El Paso dominated the possession, which is surprising because RGV usually was the one that would dominate possession in their games. But I honestly didn't see a moment on, like in previous years, where El Paso was going to be a danger to Tyler Derrick's goal. And I think it also has a lot to do with the fact that our defensive line was very composed and focused for the 90 plus minutes. And I think one of the keys is Tyler Derrick being on goal. His leadership, his experience really helps a lot with being able to maintain that organization in the back line. Because I was even surprised that even Lucho Solignac was not there in taking advantage, because he's usually, every time we go against El Paso, every time we go against Lucho Solignac, whether when he was in San Antonio or when he was with El Paso, he would always find a way to score against the Toros. Last night, he wasn't able to.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I asked John Hutchinson about directly. It just seemed that he wasn't playing at the point as the forward, as a true striker yesterday. He just seemed to have to. He was moved further back on those attacks, or he found himself every time on those attacks slightly behind, like maybe I would say about maybe anywhere between 10 and 12 yards from where he usually is, and that led for him not to be a factor on those attacks. And I think I all the credit goes to Rio Grande Valley. I mean, they did everything that they had to do in order to get the win. They were ordered, they were structured, they were disciplined. And then of course the second goal might have been a little bit circumstantial, but still, it was an individual play that was just it was all the credit goes to Pinzon, right? That's his last name that scored the second goal. Yeah, all the credit goes to him for that individual play that just sealed the victory for RGV.
What was the reaction from the fans from this result?
I don't think there wasn't a whole lot of booing going on after the game. It, it wasn't. I think as far as fan reaction goes, and you mentioned Tyler Derrick, all of that expertise, he needed it because God knows he got verbally crucified for the entire second 45 minutes right there by Section 105.
Yeah, definitely. So much needed 3 points for RGV in their quest to try to salvage a playoff spot. They aren't that far behind, and they do have a kind of, compared to most of the teams that are also looking for that playoff spot, they do have an advantage when it comes to the goal differential. But then again, that's tier number 5 when it comes to tiebreakers. So we can't really look into goal differential as a positive. The Toros need to get some good results, because now you not only have to get the good results, but also they have to be aware of what the other teams and how their results are, and hope that they don't get 3 points as well when you're trying to salvage a playoff spot. And moving forward, there's going to be some good matches tonight. Jonathan, anything you want to say?
I'll just go ahead and throw in another standings fun fact that I noticed a few days ago. I don't know if it's still true because we had some midweek games, but something I noticed again, kind of pointing out how imbalanced the East is, or more how balanced and competitive the West is. A few days ago, there was a 9 point gap between the team in last place, the last playoff place in the East, and the next closest team, the team right below the playoff line. There was a 9 point gap between them, and there was also a 9 point gap between the team in the last playoff place in the West and the bottom of the table. That should tell you nobody is eliminated from this race yet, and it's going to be so exciting this last final month to see how it's going to change week in and week out, because nobody is eliminated yet. And I mean, there are a few teams that certainly, you look at form, you look at how much they have to do, probably not going to make it. Their odds are very slim, but there are plenty of teams that still have a chance to climb above that line.
Yeah, definitely. I think the fact that Orange County, even with how bad they have been results wise, uh, that there's still a mathematical possibility for them to salvage a playoff spot. I think that just goes to show, like you mentioned, how competitive the Western Conference is. But we do have some key matchups coming up in these upcoming days. Obviously, you've got San Antonio will be playing this weekend. Who are they playing, Jonathan?
San Diego Loyal, top of the table clash. There's an opportunity here for SAFC, particularly playing at home, It already has an 8-point lead over San Diego, who's in second place, and that's with a match in hand for SAFC. So a win here, even just a draw, and SAFC is pretty darn close to securing first place in the conference, you would think. Um, and it just it's going to be interesting too because San Diego now had kind of I don't think has ever been top of the Western Conference, but had kind of stuck around and for the last month or two has been in second place at a distance from San Antonio usually, but still in second place, and now might get drawn into third, maybe even fourth if it doesn't start turning things around soon. So, like I said earlier in the show, nobody can put together a complete season in this league, particularly in the Western Conference. It's tough, and so San Diego is not gonna as good of a season as it has had. It does not want to just completely fall off here at the end, like it possibly could do.
What are some of the reactions from within the locker room? Were you able to communicate with Alan Marcina what his thoughts are on this upcoming match? Is there kind of like a rock in their shoe after that 3-0 loss in San Diego?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Sam Adeniran at practice gave sort of the most direct answer. I said, how nice is it to have this opportunity to just a month after that 3-0 loss in San Diego, where the team not only didn't get the result, but didn't feel like it was playing by its team identity. Is it nice to so quickly have this chance to set things right, to, put that behind you? And he said, look, I think pretty much everyone has already put it behind us. That's what you have to do as professionals is say, okay, particularly when you lose, what did we not do right in this game? What can we improve going forward? And then you put it in a box, you lock up the box, and you throw away the key. You just have to move on to the next one. So, obviously every match there are 3 points, and I think here and there, you might have heard SAFC, head coach Alan Marcina and some of the players acknowledging, yeah, maybe it's a little more important because it's, a team that has given them some problems. But obviously, they want to win every game. And Marcina, even though it's a cliche, he did use that phrase of, every game we treat it like a final. We treat it as if it's going to be our last. So.
Okay, Wilmer Cabrera. But
But
yeah,
the difference is Marcina gets results.
I am not I'm not arguing that.
Oh,
I am not
I know
arguing
you
that.
wouldn't. I know you wouldn't.
And here
I
I
would look
am.
like,
This episode, I paid compliments. I thought we were gonna let it
what
go.
is this,
I was
opposite
already,
day?
I was already gonna, I was already preparing to fire off a tweet. My tweet was gonna read something
Forgive me, Wilmer.
like on tonight's recording, we talked smack about the MLS and we
Not
complimented
Wilmer.
the Toros as Wilmer Cabrera. Now I can't send out that tweet, man.
Hey, look.
Way to go,
He
Jonathan.
might have gotten the better of Hutchinson, but overall, I mean, regular listeners to this show know we generally do not give Wilmer a pass.
That's true. You just took up Joe's mantle. That's there. That's all. Nothing changed. It was just the person who sent the diss over to Wilmer. But speaking of Wilmer, RGVFC will be hosting New Mexico United this Saturday at HEB Park. The Toros will be looking to make it 2 wins in a row and continue their hunt for a playoff spot, going up against the team of the Land of Enchantment. As Joe did mention a little while ago, New Mexico has kind of hit a rut as well. They're still a decent defense. I think they're like third or fourth best defense in the Western Conference, but offensively, as he mentioned in the game that they played against New Mexico, New Mexico was not very accurate in front of goal. They kind of went full Toros mode when it comes to shot accuracy. So I
Hey, by
honestly,
the way, Edson, I thought about you on a handful of occasions yesterday while watching that. El Paso Toros game because man, I thought you exaggerated time and time again on this podcast about how terrible the Toros' aim is. Man, it's pretty bad.
I told you. I told you.
It really is. Good God.
Yeah, it's really not that great. They had improved. Honestly, they improved in some aspects, and now there are actually some shots that are going into the net or going into on target. But for the most part, they're as far as their average or as far as their percentage is still not great to get themselves. But as long as they score more than their opponent, I think that's pretty much all that matters, especially right now when all you care about is points. But I think the advantage is going to be Toros will be back into their regular sized field. I think New Mexico United is going to struggle. Not having the limited dimensions at Isotopes Park. The weather's going to be a huge factor, but the question is that I have is, will is this momentum that the Toros have created for themselves? I think they've only lost two games in the last six, and they've been able to score and this time that they have been away. Is that enough to shake off the rust that the Toros had been showing in the last couple of home games, where, as Joe mentioned, they've been shooting, but very little of those shots would actually go on target, or much less into the back of the net. So it's going to be a very key matchup for RGVFC if they want to continue, because it's not going to get any easier after that. But we will be talking about those games in later episodes of the Striker Tejas podcast. But unfortunately for Joe, there is no El Paso game to talk about this weekend, but it does give the Locomotive a much needed rest from their all the games that they have been playing in the last couple of weeks. So they don't come back until the 18th. I think you mentioned
That would be
when
correct.
when they will be playing the much maligned LA Galaxy 2.
Yeah, no, definitely. They travel for the final time to Southern California, trying to get at this is a pretty much must win situation. But we'll talk about that down in next week's podcast when El Paso is going to fly down to LA to face LA Galaxy 2. But if I was the Locomotive fan, and message to all Locomotive fans, if you guys need to get your soccer fix and want to cheer on a team to a win, I think you definitely Locomotive fans are going to be very much have are going to very much have a vested interest in what's going to be the LA Galaxy 2 at OCSC game on Saturday night. The club is reporting, Orange County that is, that the game is sold out. Obviously, with the news that came out earlier this week, how you guys had said that they were going to try and continue to sneak this under the table. Edson, I believe that was you. As far as the legal battle with the stadium and the involvement of the LA Galaxy that wants to kick out Orange County SC, the Orange County is probably going to be extremely motivated as they have ever been, probably in their club's history, to get a result. And a result in Orange County's favor would very much do a whole lot of good for what is El Paso Locomotive's current playoff situation.
I definitely agree, and it's going to be good scouting as well for El Paso to see how Los Dos plays against Orange County. Basically, they pretty much released a club statement, or Orange County SC, mentioning that the council or the city of Irvine did mention that. Uh, that there
I
is
guess,
no guarantee that OCSC will be back at Championship Stadium for 2023.
And
Make of you want from that.
yeah, well,
Jesus.
and I think to put that into a broader context, the biggest takeaway maybe for me is that's the only thing that City Council told Orange County. like Orange County kept wanting to keep constant communication, and the city
Radio
council was just
silence.
kind of ignoring them, whatever.
Radio
And so
silence.
for that to be the only message that they send, it almost seems to me like the city council has already made up its mind and just doesn't even want to, like, it doesn't matter how many people scream in their face. They've already decided what they're going to do and don't want to even acknowledge it. Maybe it's that they want to deal with it privately. I mean, that's, fingers crossed. Hopefully, it isn't settled yet. But to it's very ominous to me that that is the only communication. Not communicating with them in the first place. That's bad. But for that to be the only thing that they say, oof.
So basically, the city of Irvine has been ghosting Orange County SC all this time.
Exactly.
But you know what? You
Yeah.
know what? As they say in Spanish, piensa mal y acertarás. And I regret saying that my initial suspicions when the news first broke, unfortunately, have become true. This whole pulling out of the agenda thing was it was just a facade for people to believe that, oh, like they fell into the pressure, when it seems apparent that everything was going to continue under the table, to the point where at this point they're pretty much Orange County is pretty much begging City of Irvine, just tell us yes or no so we can just move on, kind of thing. So it's a sad state of affairs for USL and the USL fan base, and I wish these kind of things didn't happen, but like we talked about MLS before, it's just a big battle of domination.
MLS is like the evil empire, and maybe not so much these days, but the Galaxy is probably toward the top of the list of the evil franchises in that, in the league. No
And
disrespect to our
and
people who
Soccer
cover them.
United marketing is the emperor. But
Do
that's
it.
another conversation for another day.
Let the hate flow through you.
Um,
Unlimited power.
oh man. Oh man, but yeah, but we'll keep you all updated to see what continues to hold going on in that situation. But guys, I think that's gonna do it. Actually, let's give our predictions to how many points. We already said it's only going to be 2 games this weekend. Jonathan, Joe, whoever wants to go first. How many points are Texas USL teams going to be making this weekend? Joe says 2.
Joe says 2. For those of you listening in podcast form, he held up 2 fingers.
Oh yeah, I feel like the radio guy that says, "Oh, look at that." Yeah, no, sorry.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Really
the radio
professional
play-by-play guy goes, "Oh my God, would you look at that?" Audience is
No,
like,
we're radio.
Look at that. That's why I'm listening to you. No, two is mine. A couple of draws. I don't know why they feel logical.
Jonathan?
I'll be a little more optimistic. 4 points. Someone will get a win, and the other team will still get a draw. Not bad.
I'm going to be super optimistic this week. I'm going to say 6.
Maybe. I don't know. It's entirely possible. The way, like I said, SAFC's gotten out of its slump, and you hinted at the Toros starting to show some life, maybe making another late season surge. So it's not crazy.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. Unfortunately, I do not have with me the predictions from last week, and if anybody won, we'll leave that for Roberto to tell us in the upcoming episode for next week of the Striker Tejas. But guys, thank you so much for listening to us. I know it was a really long episode, but we had a lot to talk about from many different happenings and news going on in the USL world. But don't forget, guys, we can't do this without your support. Be sure to subscribe to the Striker News, where you get a lot more coverage, not only here in Texas, but also in Atlanta, also in California, for the same low price for a subscription to the website and all of the content that we provide for soccer fans in those markets. And Obviously, you can be sure to check out the Striker Tejas podcast every week. If you guys enjoy it, be sure to give it 5 stars at your preferred um, and your preferred platform of choice. And be sure to follow us on all of our personal social media. For me, it's at eochoa_8.
For me, it's JRod in 915 at Yahoo or at Twitter on Twitter.
Oh, this guy giving us the email and everything. Here's my email and here's my password.
Yeah, right.
Everyone spam Joe's email. You can find me at Check J Footy. I mean it CheckJFooty. Self-explanatory.
All right, guys. So until next time, this has been the Striker Tejas podcast. Y'all have a good night.
This